Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for coming to this meeting. It's a pleasure to have you here today. I would like, first of all, to thank the Director General, Roberto Acevedo, for having accepted to open this meeting. And I would like also to thank our panelists, first of all, the Chairman of our Council, Ambassador Fernando de Mateo, the Permanent Representative of Australia to WTO, Ambassador McCormick, the former Deputy Director General of the WTO and former Ambassador of Chile to the WTO, Alejandro Jara. The current, we had invited Guillermo Valles, but he has been stopped in Sao Paulo. He was coming back from Paraguay, so he couldn't do it. I spoke with him yesterday. I couldn't do it, but her Chief of Cabinet, Mrs. Henderson, is here, and she will read on his behalf a statement. And the Director of the Agriculture Division of WTO, Evan Rogerson, thank you for coming, all of you, to this meeting. It is a great honor to me to pay tribute today to Ambassador Nestor Stancanelli, an outstanding Argentine diplomat, and above all, a great person and a friend of many of us. This initiative is the result of the wish of many friends of him, like Fernando, Alejandro, Guillermo, and Evan, among many others, that all along these years, and since I arrived to Geneva, had been telling to me that Argentina had the duty to honor a person that made such an important contribution to the multilateral trade negotiations. I share that view, and I'm convinced that we should pay respect and recognition to all those that have dedicated their careers, like Nestor did, to the goals and objectives of this organization. I would like to recall that yesterday we paid tribute also to Ambassador Clodoaldo from Brazil, who has also worked here in this fora and has been also an outstanding diplomat for the Brazilian Foreign Service. Nestor Stancanelli joined the Foreign Trade Service in the late 60s and served as a foreign trade attaché in Lima and Rome. And in 1986, he was posted in Geneva to the Argentine mission, and then, during what was the old GATT and even before the Uruguay round, he started his long-standing action, not yet achieved, for the inclusion of the agriculture in the multilateral negotiations and to promote its liberalization, in the understanding that this objective could foster the growth and development of the developing world. He was one of the founders of the Kearns Group. He was a negotiator in agriculture and services in the Uruguay round. He was then ambassador in Australia for 7 years, greatly contributing to the friendship between our two countries. And until the last moment of his life, he continued to be the most appreciated advisor of all our ministers. In June 2010, when Ambassador Chiaradia was posted as ambassador in Washington, he was offered the post of Vice Minister for International Economic Relations. He asked for some months to allow what he expected to be his complete recovery, but his health was already seriously damaged, and to the great regret of the President and of our minister, this couldn't happen. Today, while intense debates on the necessary results of agriculture characterize the work of our organization, the lesson of his relentless effort to liberalize the agricultural trade and his strong belief that this could only take place within the multilateral framework of the WTO serves as a great example to all of us. So I hope that today, in remembering him, we should profit to examine the importance of agriculture in the results that we expect for our future activities in the year and in the ministerial that we are going to have in Nairobi next December. So that's what I wanted to say as an introduction, and I'm very glad to give now the floor to the Director General of the WTO, Mr. Acevedo. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alberto, ambassadors, colleagues. Good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to say just a few words of introduction this morning. The agenda is even more packed than usual, but I thought it was important to take a few moments to be with you here today. When I learned about this event, I made sure that I was in touch with my friend Alberto Dalotto to make sure that I had a chance to pay my personal tribute to Nestor. And I worked with Nestor directly in many occasions. in Argentina, we met several times, here in Geneva, particularly during the meetings which led to the impasse in 2008. Nestor was here quite often, and I was always talking to him and exploring ways forward. We had many different fronts, not only here, even within Mercosur it was difficult to get a common understanding and approach. So we worked very, very closely, and every time that I talked to Nestor, he was always open, and he had firm views, but he was open. He would listen, always. He would listen, wouldn't always agree, but he was open to explore ideas and different concepts. And one thing that I remember back then in 2008, that he told me several times in the corridors as we were roaming around, he said, he didn't use that word, but what he was trying to say was that we needed the effort to be doability. So I think he was a visionary man, because back then, in 2008, he already knew that we were not going to make it. It was just too far. And he was saying, we have to get real, we have to be more realistic about what we can do. These people are dreaming. I mean, he was kind of a very, very, much more on the spot than we were, I think, at the time. So this is a very important and timely event, I think, also because it celebrates a man who gave a very important, an outstanding contribution, I think, to the development of the multilateral trading system. And Ambassador Dalotto just mentioned his contribution with the agreement on agriculture during the Uruguay round. And the whole point was to make the agreement and the system itself more stable, more predictable as a trading environment. So the multilateral trading system, I think the WTO, to the extent that it incorporates the very notion of the multilateral trading system, owes much to Nestor's hard work and deep understanding. He was a very skillful negotiator, always very hard, but all his colleagues liked him very much because of the personal approach that he had, and his always constant courtesy and respect for everybody else around the table. And again, this is very timely because we need some of Nestor's spirit today for what we're doing now here in Geneva and elsewhere. Everything that he did was about improving the multilateral disciplines in agriculture, to open up opportunities, especially for developing countries. Nestor saw trade as an essential development strategy, with, of course, agriculture at its heart, and he worked really hard to make it a reality. And his vision was, above all, very broad and very inclusive, one that actually transcended, I think, the interests of even his country and regional groups. Nestor had always been very effective in advocating for Argentina's interests, but at the same time he never lost sight of the shared interest that the system represents for all the members. He was a multilateral man, always had been. So here too he has a very enduring message for us to deliver for its members. The WTO does need to give it, it needs from the members that they give the WTO their active support and to make their appropriate contributions to its development. So this needs to be a system whose benefits can be shared by all. So this has to be a system of shared benefits and shared responsibilities. Now, I'm sure that these themes, these issues are going to come up in the discussions that you're going to be having. I want to congratulate Argentina for taking the initiative. These are very, very critical issues, and we are now at a moment when we need to have a better understanding about the opportunities that we have and the importance to seize what we can. I think that's the most important point at this point, at this moment. And what we can see has to be meaningful, has to be substantive, has to be a step forward, whatever it is. And I think that's what Nestor would be doing here if you were here with us today. So I want to thank you all very much. I apologize for not being able to stay with you. Like I said, the day is truly charged, even more than usual. And I do hope to be briefed later on about the results of the event and of the views that you have expressed. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Alberto, and have a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I thank you very much, the Director General, for his remarks, and I'm very glad to give now the floor to Ambassador Fernando de Mateo, the President of the General Council of the WTO.
Well, thank you very much, Alberto. I think that this tribute, this homage to Nestor was overdue, and really thank you very much for organizing it and allowing us to speak about Nestor and his contribution to the multilateral trading system. Nestor, he was a passionate man. He was a passionate man on trade, to start with, and the contribution of trade and development, contribution of science and technology to trade, and from that to development of high technology goods. He was the one who sold Australia a nuclear plant, and I think it's the biggest, you can correct me now, but the biggest deal that Argentina has continued to export high-tech products in the field of nuclear technology. This was the biggest. He wrote multiple articles on trade, multiple articles on trade and development, on economic integration, Latin American integration, and of course on the GATT, on the WTO, and on the future of the multilateral trading system. I believe his last article was on it, and he also wrote a book on the relations between Australia and Argentina, and it was a very, very interesting comparison of how the two countries had developed. And as you mentioned, Alberto, founder of the Kearns Group and negotiator in two complicated issues in the Uruguay round. The agriculture, of course, and services. And though and at the time, and still is the case, we negotiated in silos. Here it was through him there was this connection between the two groups of negotiation. And I remember in 1990 when we were in Brussels, when the Uruguay round was supposed to conclude, there was this breakdown in agriculture, and somebody said, "It's Nestor." No, it was not Nestor. It was Argentina. No, but it was. But he always believed that we could conclude the Uruguay round successfully. And when we met after the signing of the Marrakesh agreement, and I said, "Well, there is not that much in services. I don't know about agriculture." He said, "Well, there's not much in either services or agriculture, but at least there is something worth to build upon. There we have the structure to start building upon this, and we will start in 5 years' time, in 2000. We will start to negotiate both ag and services. Well, you know the story. We need people like Nestor back to help us and have his initiative, his vision of the world that would allow us to conclude these negotiations that we are embarked right now. So what he said was, if I remember his words, the Uruguay round has settled the table. The food will come afterwards, and we'll start still waiting for the food to come. And in any case, he was a great negotiator and a great friend. And I remember that I was chairing a service meeting when the news came of his passing away. And, well, I could barely contain
Thank you very much, Fernando. Thank you very much for your words. And now I would like Hamish to continue.
Thanks, Alberto. Like others, it really is a great honor to say a few words today as we meet to honor Nestor Stancanelli. And I'm particularly pleased because I've been able to draw together some very personal reflections from two Australian friends of Nestor, and both distinguished Australian ambassadors, and Peter Husson and Don Kenyon. Some of you may recall them. Don Kenyon was the Australian ambassador in Geneva at the end of the Uruguay round, and also our first ambassador to the WTO. And Peter Husson was Australian ambassador to Argentina. He was our senior official in the Cairns Group context. He was a negotiator through the Uruguay round as well. So they're both people well qualified to recall some of the charming aspects of their contact over many years with Nestor. These reflections I've put into a paper which I'll be distributing today for people to get a bit more detail in there. But essentially, Australian officials and ministers had very close and productive links with Nestor over a quarter of a century, and those links began in a Uruguay round, and specifically a Cairns Group context, from 1986 to 1994. Then they moved to a bilateral phase when Nestor was Argentina's ambassador to Australia from 1998 to 2005. And then they resumed their WTO and Cairns Group context in the Doha round from 2005 until Nestor's untimely death in 2011. And as we've already heard, from the very beginning, Nestor and Argentina were firm supporters of the Cairns Group concept and its work. First contact with Nestor is recalled as being in the meetings, the officials' meetings in Montevideo and Pattaya in 1986, and those meetings led up to the ministerial meeting in Cairns in Northern Australia in August 1986, where the Cairns Group had its genesis. And Nestor is remembered by Peter and Don as a man who was always ready to dedicate the hours and the intellectual and physical effort necessary to negotiate with good effect. And that was evident throughout the course of the Uruguay round. Sometimes it was with the help of a glass or two of red wine, and sometimes it was after a quick hit on the tennis court, and sometimes it involved both. He also had a ready eye for strategy and communicating Cairns Group positions publicly. It was Nestor who first suggested that the Australian Prime Minister Bob Hawke use an already scheduled address to the GATT Council to introduce the Cairns Group's first proposal in October 1987. Nestor is remembered as an important player within the Cairns Group because he had a knack for finding positions that bridged the very diverse positions within the Cairns Group. There was also, they remember, a very solid streak of Latin steel in Nestor, and as Fernando has recalled, he was one of the prime movers of the group of Latin American countries who withdrew from the negotiations at the midterm review in Montreal in December 1988, and then it was repeated later on as well. And I think this importantly demonstrated for the first time that without an acceptable liberalizing outcome for agriculture, there would be no outcome at all to a GATT round. Don Kenyon recalls the frequent warnings given by Nestor that we would regret quarantining green categories of support as they would get out of control in the future as the new form of agricultural distortion. At the time, Don says that they knew Nestor had a point, but nobody else inside the Cairns Group foresaw green forms of domestic support becoming as important as they subsequently have today. From 1988 until 2005, Nestor served as Argentina's ambassador to Australia. He did that with great distinction, having attended meetings over a decade with 7 Australian trade ministers and 2 prime ministers drawn from both sides of Australian politics. Nestor enjoyed access to decision makers in Australia that was second to none. His term was marked by continued cooperation on economic matters, enhanced education and cultural exchanges, and he also served with distinction as Dean of the Diplomatic Corps in Canberra from 2004 to 2005. While in Australia, Nestor lectured at the Australian National University, and he helped to establish the Centre for Latin American Studies at our National University in Canberra. He was honoured in 2004 with an honorary Doctorate of Laws by the ANU. On his return to Buenos Aires, Nestor fulfilled a long-held objective by hosting a major seminar sponsored by the University of Buenos Aires and the Australian National University. The outcome was a book released in 2011, edited by Nestor, entitled Under the Southern Cross, Australia, Argentina, a comparative analysis of their economic, social, cultural and educational development. That book stands as a testament to the friendship and links Nestor established with so many Australians and between our 2 countries. Finally, just let me say that as I grew up through the negotiating function in our Department of Trade and our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, we always were told stories about Nestor. I never worked directly with him, but it was a name and a reputation that came before him. Whenever I was in Geneva, he was off in Australia and vice versa. But certainly he's a man that's admired and remembered and respected greatly for his contribution to the Cairns Group and to efforts by those who worked assiduously in the former GATT and now the WTO to try and make the unfairness of agricultural markets better for all of us in the end of the day, despite the political difficulties. So I'd like to propose a toast, a metaphorical toast at this stage, hopefully one that's less metaphorical in a little while. But to Nestor, thank you very much for all your contributions.
Thank you very much, Hamish. You are right. We are going to have a toast outside. We will have some Argentine wines to share with all of you. So, Alejandro, I would like to listen to your speech.
I look forward to the toast, even though it's not Chilean wine. Thank you, Alberto. Thank you for inviting me to participate here. Nestor Stancanelli was certainly a very good friend, an outstanding trade negotiator. As Hamish recalled the formation of the Cairns Group, I'm old enough to say that I was there too, in Pattaya and Cairns, etc. So I lived through those years, and I saw that Nestor Stancanelli was a person who can make a real difference. I'll say that until the Tokyo round, agriculture had been mainly the affair of the 2 big elephants, the European communities, as it was known at the time, and the United States. They called the shots, and they tried to get a balance, doing as little as possible, and at the same time while having a situation where there was no basic understanding or consensus about the rules that rules to regulate international agricultural trade. So it was a breakdown in the system, and something had to be done. And this was clearly understood by some who led the way, beginning with the Cairns Group, beginning meetings in Montevideo and Pattaya and Cairns and so on. And one thing which became very clear to us then was that in order to be effective in the negotiations, you had to have a technical basis. You had to master the details, the intricacies of agriculture policies. And that is not something easy. And you had to have the analytical capacity to analyze to assess the impacts of proposals and ideas. And I think that Australia understood this, and it's little wonder that Australia became the leader of the Cairns Group and to hold the chair of the Cairns Group on a permanent basis, because they had the technical capacity to do it. But it was not only Australia, it was Nestor. And Nestor was equivalent to a whole team of Australians. He knew everything, he had to know everything, he had to know more than others and all the rest, and he knew all the details. So he was a formidable person to negotiate, particularly when he is on your side. That led to the Uruguay round, an agreement over an understanding about the basic rules that must regulate agriculture trade, bringing agriculture back into the fold of the multilateral trading system. Not much trade liberalization. Some reform, change of instruments. For example, the European communities changing the use of variable levies, etc. And then some reform ensued afterwards in some countries, driven by budgetary considerations, and in others by the demographics. But it has to be recalled today that, as I said, not much liberalization took place then, and that this is a must. And that the same countries, sent out a very clear message. And they wrote it in the Uruguay round, that the next time around, it has to be for real. You have to reform agriculture policies. And they wrote it. The preamble of the agreement on agriculture, recalling that their long-term objective, as agreed in the midterm review of the Uruguay round, is to establish a fair and market-oriented agricultural system. And that reform process should be initiated through negotiations of commitment, support, and protection, and through the establishment of strengthened and more operational and effective GATT rules and disciplines. This is later reproduced in Article 20 of the Agriculture Agreement. That was then. The long-term objective, that was written in 1988. And that objective has not changed because we have not moved much, at least in the context of the WTO. We're still waiting. Since doing agriculture reform cannot be a standalone agreement, negotiating in isolation because of the politics, it requires it requires a balance. In other words, how much of other issues in other areas is needed to do agricultural reform, however modest. And that requires a lot of NAMA. And this requires a lot of hard work to achieve that balanced exchange rate between agriculture, NAMA, and agriculture, NAMA, plus other issues. And we came quite close to achieving that. 2008, we got a deal on agriculture. Complicated. Few people really understand it. I don't. And it's a document which is still there, the Rev 4, I think it is. It's stable to an extent. It's flexible, and it's transparent. It's transparent because a lot of effort went into making transparent, making it known how countries would use the exceptions built in the agricultural text, and therefore knowing what the impact could be. And that was achieved in agriculture, but not in NAMA. So that became a problem. Except for one, maybe, which also came quite close to solving, but never quite, on the special safeguard mechanism, where some countries, I'm exaggerating, did want a special safeguard mechanism not linked to actual liberalization and with no limitations. A blank check to wipe out any foreign supplier without much analysis, justification, or warning. That doesn't seem right to me. It didn't seem right to me then, nor now. It became a political issue, and no doubt the traditional safeguard we have Article 19 in the Agreement Safeguard is not sufficient for agriculture because it's triggered by volumes and not by prices. So maybe something can be done, but under certain disciplines and conditions. It cannot be a blank check. It doesn't work. What was traditionally agriculture, so on, a developing issue, now became an issue of exporters and importers. Since the safeguard mechanism was not liked and opposed also by many exporting developing countries. But even then, in 2008, we got stuck on NAMA, the most classical and traditional of all areas under the multilateral trading system. The old notion of less than full reciprocity and special differential treatment, whereby these notions is a one-size-fits-all for developing countries, did not work anymore and does not work anymore because we have a different balance. We have countries, we have China and other emerging economies that must do more. And so we have a problem now of achieving the other balance on NAMA and elsewhere. We have to reinvent, if you will, those concepts and introduce more flexibility and change the politics of it. Now, little wonder that in all these years, the bilateral free trade agreements, mega, have become so easy to do because they don't deal with domestic support. They don't require that exchange and that balance to be achieved. And Nestor, in his last years, came to Geneva very often. And what we were discussing today, as Roberto, the Director General, recalled, about doable, recalibration, meaning less ambition, more flexibility, that was what Nestor was saying in those years when he came to Geneva to deliver a message representing Argentinian interest. I, and many others, dismissed his ideas, his approach, because we thought that it was Argentina who wanted to do as little as possible, at least on NAMA, to as little as possible to bring more competition in its domestic market. However, today, as I read the news, the press, and I talk to friends and colleagues, and I see average. And this was what Nestor was proposing in those years, leading up to 2008. Come to my office and say, we should do the approach of the Uruguay round. We should average. That would introduce flexibility. We can get things done and move on. And as I look today, I have frequently thought when reading the news that Nestor will open the door of my office and say, I told you so. But it's lamentable that to do something to bring this round to a close, that we may miss the boat of serious agriculture reform. It's a bad combination of some who have abdicated leadership, like the United States, to carry out the domestic discussion and political battle to move that United States trade policy in a serious way to do agricultural reform and to bring it to the WTO. It is lamentable that others too, like India and a few other countries, want to do little or nothing on agriculture and maybe other areas. And that combination, I think, has led us to a situation where we have now, in a situation where we are bringing down the ambition and missing the boat of doing serious agricultural reform once and for all. I understand the sensitivities, I understand the politics, but I do believe, very sincerely, that agriculture policies cannot be continued to carried out at the expense of others, at the expense of the poorest farmers of the world. So I think that Nestor understood this very well, and as has been said, he understood it with passion, with intellect, and skills. So I pay, like others, a tribute to his memory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. Thank you. I'd like Evan, if you could continue.
Thanks, Alberto, and thanks also for inviting me along to take part in this tribute to Nestor, which I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to do. I see I'm down to speak on history and perspectives, which I have no intention of doing because I'll put you all to sleep. It's a bit close to lunch. Instead of which, since this is a gathering in memory of Nestor and a tribute to him, I'd like to instead suggest a few relevant points looking at through the lens of his career and his contribution to our trade and WTO community. Firstly, the man. I'm one of those who knew Nestor from the beginning of the Uruguay round. I joined the agricultural division of the GATT in June 1986, just before Ponta, so I had a close-up view from a pretty humble level for throughout the round. And Nestor, though I discover he was only 7 years older than me, was someone that we very much looked up to and was already one of the key figures in the agricultural negotiations and was certainly one of the architects of the agreement on agriculture. At a personal level, he was always a pleasure to deal with, and I can say that. And it's not all senior delegates who always treat junior members of the Secretariat with courtesy. Nestor did, unfailingly. He was calm, he was courteous, he was balanced. He had both the substantive detail, as Hamish has mentioned, and also the political smarts, which again is not a combination that you find all the time. He had gravitas, but he also had a very good sense of humour underneath his rather lugubrious appearance. He was a good guy to be with. Mike Moore, our former DG, who had a leading role at the political level in founding the Cairns Group, always had great respect and liking for Nestor, and he has asked me personally to pass on to all of you that sentiment, along with his best wishes for our continuing efforts here. He still believes. Same with other Secretariat colleagues, many of whom I've talked to recently about Nestor, and we all share the same respect and affection for his memory. The negotiator. We can all learn a lot from Nestor, and others who have gone before have said so. He combined forceful advocacy of his country's position with a respect for the position of others, attention to detail with a sense of the big picture. He was good at outreach to others. As Hamish has noted, he was a founding member, and Alejandro have noted he was a founding member of the Cairns Group. Not for me to comment on the substance of the issues there, but certainly it is notable that the broad-based nature of that group cut across traditional north-south lines, and it made it a new kind of force. And Nestor, I think, was very important in that development. His focus was always, I think, not so much an ideological as a practical one, less about where you've come from than where you're going. And he embodied a conviction, I think, that what we're doing here was not just a matter of bargaining, but also a matter of building, that we were building a fairer, more equitable system of rules and disciplines for agricultural trade in order to create opportunities for trade, opportunities for growth, opportunities for development. This was an active, enabling vision of agricultural trade and development, not a static one or a defensive one. This message has become somewhat blurred, I think, in recent years, and I think we need to reclaim that aspect of Nestor's vision and his conviction. It's useful to recall very briefly what that vision gave us and where we've got thanks to the efforts of Nestor and the other heroes of the Uruguay round. In 1986, as Alejandro recalled, large areas of agricultural trade policy lay outside the GATT rules and disciplines, and the aim of people like Nestor was to bring it in. They understood some important basic points. Firstly, the aims of the negotiation needed to have broad support. They couldn't be imposed. In particular, they had to encompass the development imperative and the central importance of agriculture in meeting it. This was done, among other things, by constructing a conceptual framework which provided not only a backbone for the negotiations, but also a simple and powerful narrative. This centered on the distinction between trade-distorting support and other types of support. This approach provided a platform on which participants at widely varying levels of development could meet to find common ground. And on this concept is based the architecture of the Agreement on Agriculture as we still have it in terms of amber, green, etc. boxes. It's still the conceptual framework within which much of our discussion takes place today. And despite what we've heard about Nestor's misgivings about the future of the green box, this structure has proved remarkably robust and resilient. There is room for argument about which policies go where and which box is more necessary than others and what should be done to various details. But the basic structure and the trade-distorting, non or less trade-distorting concept that underlies it has proved remarkably robust, and I think we should be very careful not to do anything to erode it, especially if we don't have anything better to put in its place. It was in the market access area, it was matched by the equally clear and compelling concept of tariffication, principle of tariffication. It is hard to recall now what it was like, certainly at the time when I joined the Agriculture Division, when agricultural trade was subject to QRs, variable levies, all kinds of waivers and strange practices which were neither transparent nor predictable, let alone equitable. Tariffication might not have brought much liberalization immediately, but it certainly brought agricultural market access within the ambit of the overall rules. It left the negotiators lots to do, there still is lots to do, but it at least gave the negotiators a common language, a common basis on which to work. Plus, and I think this comes out in what Peter Husson from Australia has written about Nestor, Nestor played a major role in the negotiations that led to the establishment of the SPS agreement, which is an extremely important result of the Uruguay round and one which I think is not sufficiently appreciated very often. It's certainly proved one of the more successful and operationally effective parts of the Uruguay round result. In export competition, neither Nestor nor many others, I could say me included, were satisfied with the Uruguay round outcome. But at least their efforts, the efforts of Nestor and those who worked with him, put the issue squarely center stage for the current round. And in that area too, as in many others, we're standing on their shoulders. Nestor and those who negotiated alongside him and sometimes against him all understood that you can't do everything at once. I think this came out of earlier speakers. In the examples I've mentioned, they knew that reaching consensus means compromises, something I think we need reminding of today. I think their attitude was that as long as the rails got laid down, you can be flexible about the timetable of the train. I mentioned the importance of the clear and strong narrative that accompanied the Uruguay round negotiations. That's something we lack today also. Instead, we seem to have a confusion of competing claims and contradictions. This isn't just a public relations exercise. It matters because successful negotiations need a broadly shared base of support. We could usefully reflect on what the Uruguay round teaches us in this respect about developing a set of comprehensible messages that members can agree on. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that Nestor and his generation, people talk about the great generation, and I don't want to get too nostalgic and weepy, but I think we did have a great generation of senior negotiators in the Uruguay round, and Nestor was certainly one of the leading members of that generation. Nestor and his generation gave us the basis to take agriculture forward in the WTO. We have not yet lived up to their achievement. Why not? is a bigger question than we have time for today. If anyone likes to buy me a few drinks, I'm prepared to talk about it endlessly. But maybe part of the answer is to get back in touch with the lessons of Nestor's work and his approach to negotiation. Nestor left us too soon, as indeed Clodoaldo, but his message to us all is still very much alive, and we need it more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evan. Thank you. I'd like now to give the floor to Marisa Henderson, and she's going to speak. She's the Chief of Cabinet of Ambassador Valles, and she will deliver a message on his behalf. Marisa.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. So, I am the Chief of the Office of the Director of the Trade Division in UNCTAD, and my director has asked me to give his speech on his behalf. And I just want to say that this is a very special occasion for me, not only because I am Argentine, but also I had the honor of working for the mission of Argentina dealing with the implementation of the agreement on agriculture, the first years of the implementation of agriculture. And I have personally, the Ambassador Stancanelli have already left, but however, his blueprint was still there. And we followed his steps, and it was